Hey everyone, welcome to Everything is Dead, the show where we challenge the myths of B2B and uncover how go-to-market professionals are thriving in channels everyone says are dead. Today we're diving into Outbound with Mac Reddin, CEO and co-founder at Commsor. Mac, really excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
No, my pleasure. And so I think you've had some fairly strong points of view on this topic, and so I was excited to kind of have you on. So I just want to kick you off with the statement: Outbound is dead. Like, what's your reaction to that? Do you agree, disagree? Give me your thoughts.
Do you want the nuanced answer or the spicy answer?
Well, I mean, spicy is always better for content. I feel like
Yeah,
maybe with that, and
it's
then nuanced.
I think it's actually I actually think Outbound is very very far from dead, which is actually the very thing that's killing it. So I think it's the fact that actually Outbound is a lot more alive than ever, right? There's more outbound being sent, there's more calls being made, more emails being sent, more LinkedIn DMs being made or sent or whatever language you want to
Yeah,
use,
yeah,
and that's what's making it harder and harder and harder, right? Like 5-10 years ago, if you just hit your minimum activity number as a salesperson, you would probably hit quota more often than not, right? As long as you made X calls, made X emails, did X sequences, you're probably, as long as some other stuff was good, you were probably good. So in a lot of ways, it's actually the opposite of. It's like the very fact that it's not dead is the very thing that's hurting it.
yeah. Love it, love it. Yeah, and I think that's an absolutely spot on take. I think you're totally correct in the way that actually what we have run into are more tools being created to automate, more tools being created to write copy at scale, and all these other pieces, which actually means now, and also you can warm up a million inboxes and get a million domains. And so
I
I
mean,
think
yeah,
you're,
I feel like when your outbound infrastructure looks the same as a black hat hacker's infrastructure, you have to start to question like, is this really the world we want to be like? Is this really the right way to do
yeah,
things?
yeah. And so like, I guess secondary question to that would be like, agreed, like outbound's not dead, people are doing it more than ever. I guess the more kind of nuanced or additional question I should ask is, I guess, why are people struggling with outbound at the moment? Like, why are they really struggling to break through the noise and book meetings from outbound? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it started 10 years ago, and we're seeing sort of the results of the last decade of sales outbound, like kind of. You ever heard of this thing called the tragedy of the commons?
No,
This principle, it's from like medieval, I think England, way back when,
probably,
and
probably
it's
we
like,
come up with all the weird concepts back in
yeah,
the
it's
day.
like, and tragedies are very British, right? So
Yeah, 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 exactly,
very like
exactly.
Shakespearean British and
Yeah,
whatnot. But it's the idea was like it was back when you had like a common grazing area for like cattle or sheep, or whatever, in a town, but like because it was common, nobody would take care of it. So over the course of 5-10 years, everyone would kind of take a little bit too much of it, right? They would let their sheep graze a little bit too much than they should have, etc. 10 years later, oh shit, nobody has any grazing land anymore because we've all collectively used it up. And I think over the last 10 years, outbound actually got so easy, at least easy to do, right? You could like click a button, start a sequence, click a button, generate a target list of 1,000 accounts. Now you can click a button and power dial, 1,000 people in a day. Um, we've ended up with this tragedy of the commons where effectively, right, like email, phones, social media, these are all shared resources. And my outbound does not live in a vacuum, right? It's like I always, whenever I hear people push back against this, they're always like, yeah, but my outbound is good. Like, look at how nice I'm doing it. I'm not using AI to over automate it. I'm not sending a million.
You're still competing with the crap funnel.
Exactly, right? It's like it doesn't live in this vacuum. Like my outbound is going to live alongside your outbound, and whatever buyer I'm targeting, if they're all getting more and more and more, they're going to be more likely to put a spam filter on. They're going to be more likely to filter calls. They're going to be more likely to install ad blockers, right? It's like it's a collective problem that even if only 10, 20, 30% of people are abusing the system, it collectively becomes harder and more difficult for everyone
Yep.
participating in it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think I love the analogy. I love the analogy. I mean, I can think of a witty caption for this episode already around how you comparing it to a
Tragedy
grazing
of
area.
the commons.
But I don't think you're incorrect at all. I mean, everybody uses the term saturation. I think saturation is the big one, which is,
Yeah.
um, I go into my inbox, even if you've written a really really great email, I've already got 8 that I've already had to auto delete. So
Yeah, and
you're
your
probably
brain just goes into like delete, delete.
yeah,
You
yeah,
just kind of like
exactly.
go into like autopilot mode.
Psychological, right? And so let me kind of kick over a bit of a different question, right? Because some people are obviously succeeding with outbound. The whole purpose of this show is to meet with people that are, crushing it with outbound. Um, and they're doing it a few different ways. But I think from your perspective, like what are some of the strategies or tools that are kind of helping you succeed with outbound? What are some things that you are doing personally that are maybe breaking the mold or maybe offering a differentiated approach to outbound?
I think a couple of them are super counterintuitive, and so I think for starters, we spent the last year and a half over investing in brand compared to most companies of our size and stage. Top of funnel, brand awareness, brand fun. Like we invested a lot in being a company that people recognized, knew, and had like just a positive affinity towards. Right? Like, oh, I see the dinosaur. I like the dinosaurs. You guys seem fun. There's like just like that pure top of funnel stuff, which is a lot of sales teams typically like shit on that stuff. But at the same time, you see salespeople talk about how much easier it is to sell and do outbound when you work at a recognizable brand or a trusted
Yep.
brand or a liked
Yep.
brand. So I think right out of the gate, if people already recognize you, outbound gets easier, right? I can't tell you how often I'll go to like send someone a LinkedIn DM, be like, hey, whatever message I'm sending them. And they're like, yeah, I've seen you guys everywhere. I know the dinosaur. Like, I don't really know what you do, but this sounds intriguing. There's like this pre warm up that
Yep.
happens when you build brand effectively. It's always like a hard thing to do, a
Well,
hard thing to measure.
let's double tap on that in itself because, like, obviously, I'm in firm agreement. It's something that we've also over indexed on from the SendSpark side. I think people think we're a bigger company than we
Oh
actually
yeah,
are
people
because
think we're like 100 people and we're like
yeah, exactly,
13.
because you've over indexed. And so, like, let's even start there because what I like to give people are like, here's what you can do if this resonates. And so when you talk about over indexing on brand, maybe give me some of the ways that you've done that, some tactics, some strategies. Has it been like you've invested in bringing on people that are good community managers? Have you invested market and budget into certain things? Like maybe give us the building block of like, if I'm a founder listening to this and I would like to take your approach of building brand first of all, like how do I do that fundamentally?
I think a lot of it comes from just like people have to, if people don't know you exist, it doesn't matter what you do, what you sell, how good your messaging is. For us, a lot of the brand stuff was investing in LinkedIn. Just our buyers are on LinkedIn, our audience is on LinkedIn. So a lot of it was through like founder brand and me posting content. A lot of it was about activating our community with things like we did our purple hoodie thing about a year ago that just people just suddenly just like knew about us and recognized us.
I should have worn mine. I've got one. I've got one.
I should have worn mine too. I'm actually being a terrible, brand ambassador right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Um, a lot of it's like it's such a hard thing to define and answer because like what the right investment in brand is so different for every company. For us, it was investing in being fun and lighthearted, from having a dinosaur as a logo to our tone and our just approach to things. It was investing in founder led content through my presence on LinkedIn, which yeah, it took 6 months before it really had an impact, but now it's a huge driver of just that recognizability for us. Like I said, I can't tell you how often I like send someone what I think is cold outbound. They're like, oh yeah, I've read your content. I love it. Like, let's hop on a
yeah,
call. And I'm like, oh shit. All right, cool. Like
yep,
that makes things easier. Um, and then all like for us, I think we've gained a reputation for doing merch and swag well, which has been a big brand play for us. I mean, we have this I have it sitting here, this Lego Brontosaurus set that we've done. Like it's a full custom set with instruction booklet and things like that. So there's just a lot of like, if you do things that people want to talk about, whether it's tactical and insightful content, whether it's fun stuff, whether it's merch stuff, people will talk about you, and inherently your brand will spread, right? Sometimes you can pay influencers to do it. Other times, if you just do good content, people will talk about you naturally, and you don't have to pay them to do anything. But yeah, for us, it's been, I would say, 80% of our brand work has been investing in a presence on LinkedIn, a consistency on LinkedIn, so that we're just, I also get people all the time. They're like, Mac, I open LinkedIn and there's just like a post from the Commsor team every time I
yep,
open LinkedIn. And it's like,
yep.
yeah, like, so you're just thinking about us all the time.
I also think there's an important component, and like it's interesting because it's actually come up, and I'd say almost every call I've had with people, which and you'd think that companies and marketers are thinking through this lens always, but they're not, which is I actually think foundationally it comes down to like who is your who is your target audience fundamentally, who do you sell into, and then actually your brand plays start to back into platforms that they are active on. And so again, I think for both of our companies it makes sense to over index or over leverage LinkedIn from a a content creation standpoint and stuff like that, because we sell to sellers. Sellers are very active on LinkedIn. Makes
Yeah.
sense from a platform standpoint. And so I think it's important to note for anybody listening to this, don't do LinkedIn if you are selling to home services, for example. In fact, like Facebook's probably going to be a better social platform for you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important foundational layer, which is like brand and the tactics you use to build your brand also needs to tie back into channels and persona fundamentally as well.
Brand is probably one of the hardest things to teach people how to do
Yeah.
tactically, because it's inherently like not a tactical thing.
Yep.
It's and it's, and that's why so many companies are afraid to invest in it, because it's hard to measure. It's like you kind of have to just like know. I mean, I had someone the other day ask me, like, okay, Mac, like, how did you know that purple hoodie campaign worked? And I'm like, it's been a year and you're still asking me about it.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know that it worked, right? I don't necessarily need hard trackable numbers for those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's great. That's a good kind of foundational pillar. And again, people that are listening to this, I'd wholeheartedly agree that like everything becomes easier if people know you or know your founder or know your company. Again, recognizable, soft landing in the inbox, all that type of stuff. So outside of the brand layer, you spelt time over indexed on the brand layer. What are you doing to book meetings from outbound? You mentioned just like LinkedIn DMs. Is that the only channel that you're kind of leveraging?
That was our biggest channel this year. We started layering in some light email stuff in the last few months as well. We don't do any cold calling, for what it's worth. So this is not the episode for the pro cold calling.
Oh,
If that's the one,
we got plenty of cold calling advocates that are going to be on. So
yeah,
yeah,
no, I know there's, and I'm happy to be the counterpoint to them and come butt heads with them if that's what you need.
yeah,
But for us, I think it's LinkedIn has been good just once again, because that's where our brand presence has been and where our buyers are active. Like, I've found that like a really well placed, well researched LinkedIn message or voice note or video, right? Um, it humanizes it and it works
yeah,
way better. And I'm a huge fan of the Darren McKee. I don't know if it's actually his method, but I learned it from him. The 3x3x3 method he talks about, which is every day he picks 3 target accounts. He finds 3 target like potential buyers, like personas inside that account, and he sends each of them a message. So he sends 9 messages a day into 3 different accounts. Um, and his own words, he's never missed quota or had pipeline issues when he's done that. So I think a lot of our outbound play is very focused on that sort of quality over quantity. We're not
yeah,
trying to send 10,000 emails a month. I can't remember his name, but I just saw someone recently talking about micro campaigns, which I think
yeah.
looks very similar to what we've been doing.
Eric
Like,
Eric Nowalowski. I'm going to butcher his name. He's like one of the Clay
yeah,
influencers. Post about like that's like that's how he's
yeah.
testing.
When we do email outbound the last 2 months, it's like 50 to 200 accounts in a
Yeah,
campaign at a time. It's 2 to 3 touch points. It's not the Agogi sequence of like 27 touch points in 17 days, just like beat them into submission type approach. I think
yeah.
that sort of stuff should be dead, but that's a rabbit hole
Yeah.
we don't have to go down. Um, and
So talk to
then
me
I
through,
had
and I think that the play that you just outlined, which is really interesting, because that's something that people can take away. You credited Darren, but obviously
yeah.
you're leveraging it as well. So walk me through that. So like the first step of that is I'm going to identify 3 good target accounts. How are you identifying those? Are those like lookalike accounts? Are they just like very tightly tied to your ICP? Like how do you go about even picking those 3
So for
accounts?
me, for me personally, every morning I spend about 30 minutes doing the classic like respond to LinkedIn DMs, go through new connection requests, respond to comments from, engage with my posts. Cause I often like, I'm going to bed and like the engagement keeps going because I'm in Europe and a lot of my engagement comes from the US. So I'll wake up and have like, a ton of stuff to deal with. I'll often find like a lot of days I will find my 3 accounts just in doing that, right? I'll have a new connection request and be like, oh shit, like Ben's a great lead. Great. He
Yeah.
just added me. Cool. Let me start a conversation. Like, and it's like you could argue that that's inbound, but very often I find that when people connect with you, they never start the conversation. You
No,
have
no,
to
no,
start the
definitely not.
conversation with
Yeah, yeah,
them.
definitely not.
I'll also see people engaging with my posts. I'll go through and be like, oh, that's a name I don't recognize. Oh shit, like VP of sales at XYZ company. Like I'll add them and start a conversation there. On days where I don't get enough, 3 to 5 leads to start conversations with from that, I'll do lookalike stuff. I'll look at signal stuff. I'll go look at who has downloaded our assets. Like we have our NDR playbook and our GTN for marketers playbook that we get 10, 15 downloads a day on
Yeah.
still. So it's like a lot of first party signals, I guess, is how I would categorize that.
Yep.
And could we do more to automate that? Probably. Right now, we're
Well,
finding that like
yes,
the
that was going to be my question, right? Because you're in a unique position where you're kind of founder-led sales, you're putting in the effort, you're doing it yourself, right? But for teams that have like, let's say I've got a team of 20 to 30 SDRs,
yeah,
would your advice be like literally have them do? Because okay, well, this gets into a different discussion, right? Which is are SDRs in their traditional sense going to be around in 5 to 6 years? If you're, my argument would be if you are paying the salary of 20 SDRs at a large sales org, the argument would be for them just doing 3 by 3 by 3, are they actually going to generate demand commensurate to how much we're paying them? So I
my
guess
my
that,
argument is yes, yes. If they're doing it right, I bet you a well executed 3 by 3 by 3, or make it 5 by 5 if you want, or just say, hey, I'm gonna do 2 hours. I'm gonna do like 3 high quality research message per account. Maybe I can do 10 in a day if I'm booking 2 hours of prospect, whatever it is, right? Depending on your
yep,
situation. Also, we're like we're I'm this advice is mostly useful for companies that have like I would say a 15 to 20,000 or higher ACV, right? If you're selling a
yep,
5 to 12 to 15,000 product, it's like the volume play might make more sense. Um, but if you're looking at if you're looking at an ACV of $25,000 and you're an SDR for that, right? Like a great SDR would be what, 8 to 10 meetings a month is their
yep,
quota on an
yep,
ACV of that. Like you don't need, like, you get you know one every 2 days doing a 3 by 3 method. Like, you're gonna hit your numbers that way, and it's gonna be a lot less painful. You're gonna get a lot less rejection. You're gonna build better relationships, which also pays off. I think that's another thing that we always treat our outbound as a non-binary outbound. I think
okay,
most teams think of outbound as either they're going to buy or they're not going to buy. And if you're not going
yep,
to buy, you're a waste of time, whatever, move on to the next person, right? But when you approach conversations from a quality perspective and you're focused on starting conversations, actually doing the research, etc., I can't tell you how often an outbound message for me or a sales meeting that doesn't get qualified right or whatever turns into 2 or 3 or 4 referrals to other people, right? And it's like,
yep,
if I just cold call you, like, be like, Ben, want to buy my shit? Nope, cool, hang
yep,
up, next person. You and I are never going to build the rapport for that, like, other middle option besides closed won or closed loss to happen, which is like a connection to be built.
yep,
I literally had someone this morning where I DM'd them. I was like, hey, based on what I think, I did some research on the company. I saw you guys have a very lightweight referral program. We can help with that. And they're like, hey, yeah, this is cool. Not a priority for us for the next, quarter, maybe end of Q1. And I was like, awesome, cool. Do you know any other sales leaders I should talk to? And they're like, yeah, how about this guy and this guy? So I got 2 introductions off of
yep.
one failed one. If I was doing the volume play in outbound, that would never happen.
No, you're right. And actually, like it segues nicely into, I know what, like, Comsor's main value proposition is. Like, I'm a big advocate of partnerships in general from a referral standpoint. And so maybe you could go a level deeper on the referral component and your network, and one, like how you're doing that at the moment, and then secondarily, like how Comsor can help organizations actually operationalize that. Because I think that's always the toughest part with referrals is, like, again, people view it very manually, like how do I know
Yeah.
how people are connected, when to reach out? So maybe walk me through kind of that component, because it's another part of outbound that I think is probably neglected by a lot of businesses.
So I think you could argue that the way we do referrals, I'm 50-50 on whether you could consider it outbound.
Yeah,
Most referral programs basically are like, hey, Ben, you're a huge fan of my company. Please refer people to us. And then you sit back and you're like, I hope it happens, right?
yeah,
And when I talk to most sales leaders, they always know that referrals are the fastest closing deals, the best deals, the most likely to close. But they're usually like, yeah, hey, if I get a referral, I'm never going to say
yeah,
no, but
yeah,
it's not a process.
yeah,
What we do with Commsor is we enable almost like what I like to call a reverse referral, which is
yeah,
basically like, because we can track the network. So if anyone's familiar with like a Crossbeam, like the partner overlap tool, we're kind of like that, but for people instead of accounts, right? So instead of what accounts do your partner companies know, it's what people do your investors, advisors, champion customers, partners, etc. know. And basically, like I like to say, we give you like a warm intro check before you make your traditional cold outbound. But with a reverse referral, instead of waiting for you to make that referral for me, I can say, hey, Ben, I can see that you know Melissa really well. Can you make that referral for me? I'll still give you the referral fee or the incentive or whatever program we have in place. But now I've made a specific ask. And in that case, it's kind of like outbound. I'm just picking a better messenger, right? And I love the analogy of, it's like, this kind of goes back to the tragedy of the commons, where it's like imagine you've researched an account. You're like, I've got the signals, I've got the research. I know that Ben is the perfect buyer for me. And then I go make a cold call, or I send the cold email or the DM or whatever. It's like getting in line to get into a club. It's like you're
Yep.
going to get in line with every other seller who's trying to get to Ben and hope that that message gets seen, right? But
Yep.
and the message doesn't get seen. It doesn't matter how relevant or timely the contents actually are. What we're helping you do is identify, hey, do you happen to know the bouncer of this club? Great, you can skip the line now because the bouncer can deliver that message for you, right? So it's like, just like the brand play helps make you recognizable, this go to network reverse referral play is like, is there a recognizable trusted voice, a customer, an executive, etc., who can open that door for you instead of just hoping your salesperson can batter the door down?
Yeah, and like I forget who did this to me recently. Who knows if they use Commsor or they just doing it like just off their own. Nick at 30 Minutes to President's Club reached out and he was like, and again, it could have been an automated pull. I don't know, but the message was very much like, I know that you. I think it was Phantom Buster they were trying to get an introduction to. I see that you're connected to the CMO at Phantom Buster. Do you know him well enough to make an introduction? Here's the basic value proposition, and here's a message that you can send him as well. So, like, at that point,
Yep.
it's like I'm scanning through, and it's just made it very easy for me. If like I know the person well enough, I think it's a good value proposition for them, because that's the other filter that you're like working through. Like, you don't want to make referrals where actually you don't see the value to
And
the
that's also
person.
where, once again, it's a quality play, not a
Yeah,
quantity play, right? Where it's like,
exactly. But
you
it was a
only
great
need,
message. It was a great
yeah.
message, and they made it easy. And it's like, if you make it easy for me to do, then I'm
And you could
more like,
argue that that is technically outbound. They just chose you as the outbound channel instead of
yeah.
a traditional email or phone call.
And guess what? Don't have to worry about like deliverability in
Yeah.
that standpoint, right? Because it's
You're not
like
going to get marked as spam.
I'm gonna get marked as
You're 10
spam.
times more likely to see the message VC. My favorite data point on this, by the way, there's one company whose data was tracking. They were booking about 100 meetings a month. I won't name them because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to yet. But they were booking about 100 meetings a month. And in their data, cold calls were 35% of the meetings they booked. Referrals were only 15%. But when you actually went down the funnel from no-show rate to close rate, et cetera, referrals were 35% of their closed won revenue. So while they were only 15% of booked meetings, they were more than a third of closed won revenue, because, and they had data of like the ACV was higher, the ghosting rate was lower, the close rate was higher, the time to close was faster. So it's like, I think our whole pitch is often like, if you can get the warm path, why would you ever
I love
go
it.
the cold path?
Yeah, and I've just made a note of that because I think that's just like a data point that we want to probably circulate as part of
I
this
can
episode.
send you an anonymized spreadsheet of like the
Yeah,
actual
anonymized. Yeah,
numbers if you want to put
send
it
me
in
the
this. It's
anonymized.
like,
Yeah, I'd
it's
love
really
that.
powerful when you look at it, because you're like, look, like, and of course the classic LinkedIn messaging is like, I booked X meetings from X channel, and it always stops there. No one ever goes into the data further down the
Yeah,
funnel.
the
So on
details.
that
Yeah,
data, it would be like, wow, cold call is the best channel, but cold call was only 10% of the closed won revenue.
yeah, and it's also like when people post like that, the piece that they're missing out is like, how many did you have to send? Like all the tangential stuff, like how many domains did you need to burn to actually like? There's a lot that goes into that, which
Yeah, I
is which
emailed 10,000 people to book 20 meetings, and you're like,
yeah,
was
exactly
it
right.
really
There's
worth
there's
it?
always that. There's always that that's missing fundamentally. And don't get me wrong, if you get any meetings booked from like mass cold email, great. Like it means your copy's good. Like you're probably doing something right, to be honest with you. I
I
also
will
view
say, I feel like it's very short-term mindset. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, is this like short-term pressure put on sellers to like, no matter what you do, you have to hit X number this month.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
think 3 months down the road. Don't think 6 months down the road. Sellers aren't actually given the space to like I mentioned before, like to think about that middle option besides closed won and closed lost. But if you look at the top performing sellers, like the top 5%, they are often the ones who are bucking the mold and are actually focusing on that ability.
yeah. And the piece that I'm like interested in, I hope people take away from this, is also like, if I think about, actually, if anybody listening to this call thinks about how they choose to buy, right? Just in general, like not even talking about SaaS now, but just talking about like consumer goods. Let's say like I've just had a baby, right? So like crib or whatever you're looking to buy. what I do is I ask other people that have had babies what they used, and I get their feedback, and then I go and buy that product, right? Nothing changes from a human psychology standpoint when you're buying SaaS. And I actually think people miss that, which is the the way that people buy from a consumer standpoint is friends, is social proof. All of that is warm in the
I
way that
think it's
like
even more important in B2B. Like,
yeah,
okay, you go and buy like the wrong t-shirt for your baby, like, okay, whatever. Like, with most
not a big
products you
risk.
buy as a
Yeah,
consumer, it's like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
wasted some money. If you go buy the wrong 30,000, $100,000 product in B2B, you probably lose your job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so the ACV is higher. You're right. ACV is higher, more criticality on getting the product feature set right, which is awesome. And so I guess like coming towards the end of this, I think like there's a couple of broad takeaways that I think everybody listening should take into consideration that Max kind of laid out for you. The first is the brand component, which for some people listening to this, they might be like, well, I'm not patient enough to, write LinkedIn content for
Oh
six
man,
months.
if I were a salesperson, I would be like everyone always thinks about like the classic like salesperson begging marketing team for more leads. But how
Yep.
often are the leads that they just throw over the fence to you good anyways, right? Like there's
Yeah.
that whole debate and issue.
Yeah.
If I were a salesperson, I would be begging my marketing team to invest in brand because it's going to make everything that I do as a salesperson easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's the first component, right? Like if you are an early stage startup and your plan for go to market is we are going to do cold email before doing anything else, like again, I would agree. We see it at SenseBark all the time. It also opens up additional doors from a marketing standpoint. Bigger brands want to partner with you, loads of different stuff. So brand being the first pillar. Second pillar, Mac, from your standpoint, I like the 3x3x3
I
component with
guess I'd
it.
categorize that as like quality over quantity, right?
Yeah.
It's just like if you do less messaging, but it's more focused and what I love Darren says he actually pitch slaps. And everyone says you can never pitch slap. And he's like, I pitched in the first message. The difference is he'll spend 10 or 20 minutes researching the account before he reaches out. He's not pitch slapping with an automated generic message. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, I love it, man. And then I actually think the other component is off the back of this though is like the 3x3x3 is a tactical thing that people can do today. So like if you're an SDR, even if your manager's not telling you to do this and they want you to do the high quantity piece, just take an hour out of your day, do Max method, and see the results. I
I
mean,
guess Darren's
fundamentally,
method. Don't give me too much
Darren's
credit.
method, Max, whoever coined it, probably somebody else coined it. Darren's method, but I think it's something people tactically like right now. If you're an SDR, listen to this, you could do that today. Take that away, do the method that Mac realized, and then I think the third component is referral based, and I don't want to call it outbound, just referral based introductions, in the way that
I call it like network based outbound, right? It's like
yeah,
you're picking a better
network based.
messenger.
Yeah, love it, love it. Network based outbound, and I think through the lens of that, like I would just even if you're not looking to operationalize it right now, you can do it easily enough by like just seeing LinkedIn connections. Like if you go to one of your ICP and you see that, like if I go to somebody I'm trying to prospect and do I see Max connected, open up the message to Mac. Hey Mac, how well do you know XYZ at this company? Do you
The
feel
two things
comfortable?
I would recommend that are super easy to like get better results from this, build a target account list and share it with people. When people ask you, hey, how can I help? Or hey, congrats on the new job, can I help? Be like, yeah, do you know any of these people? Can you help with
Yeah.
these? Right? Because like that specificity, I mean, we did that with our little intro board launch a week and a half ago, and we've booked 17 meetings with target accounts we couldn't get to otherwise.
Yeah, no,
The other
I think
thing is
I've got a few introductions coming over
awesome. The
from
other
you.
thing you can do is internally create like a channel where like right, not everyone in your company is working in sales, but create a channel where you can just, especially if you're at like a bigger company, 50 to 100 people or more, where you can just drop in like, hey, does anybody happen to know someone at Gong, at SenseBark, at Commsor, whatever? I can't remember who it was. I spoke to someone recently and they were like 10% of their pipeline comes from non-sales people being like, oh yeah, I know John at that company. Let me go make that intro for you. Like
Yeah.
your own company knows other people. Like leverage not just your sales team, but your marketing team, your demand gen team. Like people know people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, man. Yeah, you're right. Like again, it doesn't have to be the exact ICP, but there's probably a backdoor method for you to then inadvertently get that introduction. Love it. Really, really good tactical tips, mate. Anything that you'd leave people with just as like a final takeaway from your side or just something that people should stop doing right now? Like any final word from you on outbound in 20 as we go into 2025, I guess.
I would say, I think it's, it comes from the top, unfortunately. I think it was Zoe Hartsfield who said this once, that for every bad outbound tactic you see, there's some sales manager behind the scenes going, but that worked when I was a salesperson. So I think like the message you said is like, if you're an SDR or an AE, doesn't matter what your boss is telling you to do. Find that 30 minutes or an hour a day to try something different. Worst case, you'll learn and you'll experiment for a month or a quarter and you'll figure something out. Best case, you'll do better.
Yep. Love it,
There's
mate.
very little
Love
to
it.
lose.
Yeah, and so the fun takeaways from everybody: outbound's not dead. Just get better and try different methods. And so
It's actually
Mac,
like smaller is better in outbound
smaller
right
is
now.
better. Quantity over quality,
Yeah.
quality over quantity. Sorry, I know you said it inadvertently the wrong way. Mac, really appreciate you coming on today, mate. And yeah, like I said, thanks for everybody for tuning in.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me.